Making headlines for this week of September the 2nd. A battle for Brazil. Former president found guilty, and new president has corruption issues. Who has greater integrity? Europe on alert. 3 countries issue warnings to citizens to be prepared for something. Gold be gone. German Deutsche Bank defaults on gold delivery and the dangers of paper gold investments. And global warming scam and solution. Elitist interests do nothing, and yet a solution for a large number of planetary problems exists, but is covered up.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. Many regular listeners will have probably come across various sources of information talking about accelerated timelines and shifts that are to begin unfolding during September. I will discuss this in a little bit more detail in this week's Final Words. As we look to geopolitical events, we observe a continuation of various global events that are becoming more public and therefore more known to the general public. The challenge is to take what the mainstream media shares and to take what the alternative media shares and then try to discern what feels to be true for each individual, as truth will be relative to how each person is viewing the world from one's current belief filters. By not having access to a greater variety of events and perspectives, it means one will have more difficulty getting enough information to form a more complete picture to help one along in one's journey. Depending upon one's current worldview, any particular event could be perceived as either positive or negative without having access to other global events that also impact that particular event. For example, an individual may hear, see, or read that Monsanto has created genetically modified food to help deal with global poverty. Sounds great on one level. Another may see global trade agreements such as the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, the TTIP, or the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, and other trade deals as being positive. Only with more information that has not been reported by the mainstream media can one begin to see that these stories about Monsanto and the trade agreements are not as positive as they are being reported. Many negative events have also been reported, such as crashes in the stock markets or in the price of oil, or perhaps related to other financial events. It is all about perspective. And generally speaking, one has to look at who benefits from a particular piece of news before one can begin to discern whether or not the news really is good at all. News that benefits the global cabal or the wealthy elitists of the world will not very likely benefit the general population and vice versa. The awakening of the people of Europe to stand up against the criminal bankers and politicians of the EU is good news for the people, even though it may cause some economic pain, although it is not good news for those who are trying to keep their control over those people and keep them in debt and fear. Back in July, CVN was following events that were unfolding in Brazil. The president of the country, Dilma Rousseff, had been removed from her position due to accusations that she acted inappropriately by allegedly breaking budgetary rules of the country. The Western media reported this and very little else, leading people to suspect that Rousseff was corrupt and therefore needed to be removed. As listeners have learned on CVN, however, through people like John Perkins, a former economic hitman, there are powerful, secretive people who go into countries and intentionally attempt to destabilize these countries when the leaders do not play by the rule book set up by the global banking elites. Until one receives more of the bigger picture of what is going on there, it is virtually impossible to understand what is going on and why. Returning to the events in Brazil, let's look at a few headlines first. Euronews reports, Brazil riot police use tear gas as impeachment protests turn violent, and Michel Temer sworn in as president. CTV News in Canada reported, Brazilians celebrate president's impeachment. The BRICS Post ran 3 headline stories, Dilma Rousseff impeached, thousands protest Rousseff's trial, and Rousseff, I have nothing to hide. RT ran a headline, Coup against democracy. Bolivia, Venezuela, and Ecuador recall ambassadors over Rousseff impeachment. Depending upon the media source, one can begin to get an idea of how the media shapes our perceptions based on their corporate agenda and their corporate owners. The headlines are not necessarily false. The CTV headline, for example, may very well be reporting truth in saying that there were some Brazilians celebrating the impeachment. What CTV does not tell its audience, however, is the particular group of Brazilians who are celebrating, and it is the group that benefits from the Western hegemony that has been dominated by the US and the global banking system. The audience is left to assume that all people are against Rousseff, when this is not the case at all. The BRICS Post reported on August 31st that the Brazilian Senate voted 61-20 to impeach suspended President Dilma Rousseff on charges of mishandling and misrepresenting the federal budget during her 2014 re-election campaign. Rousseff will now formally resign from the presidency, and Vice President Michel Temer, who held her post in the interim, will now serve out the rest of her mandate until 2018. But Temer and his Democratic Movement Party is embroiled in corruption charges and investigations as well. Many of the ministers he named in the new government have resigned since Rousseff's suspension in May because of the pressures and feared scandal of a number of graft investigations. He isn't much more popular than Rousseff. Polls have shown that a majority of Brazilians do not want him to serve out Rousseff's mandate. Rather, they would like to see early elections. The deeper story not covered by the mainstream is actually the story that is more important. One has to understand not only the events unfolding in Brazil, but also look at the pattern of events that have happened in countries like Iran, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Venezuela, Ukraine, and a number of other countries that were destabilized and demonized because the leaders were not wanting to play by the rules of the Western banking cabal. The vast majority, if not all, of these South American countries fully know and understand the game played by Western controllers, and thus they are uniting more and more together to stand against Western oppression. This is why it is RT and not the Western media that reported the following on September 1st. Following Brazilian senators' vote to strip Dilma Rousseff of her presidency, Bolivia, Venezuela, and Ecuador announced they are recalling their ambassadors in protest against what they said was a coup against democracy. Venezuela condemned Rousseff's impeachment, saying it will not pursue relations with a government that stemmed from a parliamentary coup d'etat. Venezuela has decided to definitively withdraw its ambassador in the Federal Republic of Brazil and to freeze political and diplomatic relations with the government that emerged from this parliamentary coup, according to the country's foreign ministry in a statement. Ecuador's foreign ministry, in its turn, dubbed Rousseff's ouster a flagrant subversion of the democratic order in Brazil, saying it is withdrawing its representative to Brazil. Ecuador cannot ignore the fact that many of the decision makers in Rousseff's impeachment are being investigated for serious acts of corruption, they said in a statement. Ecuador's President Rafael Correa personally took to Twitter to voice his anger over Rousseff's impeachment, saying, "Never will we condone these practices, which recall the darkest hours of our America." Bolivia followed suit, saying it is also recalling its ambassador, and President Evo Morales stated that we condemn the parliamentary coup against Brazil's democracy. We stand with Dilma, Lula, and the population in this difficult time. Cuba was also critical, calling the impeachment an imperialist offensive against progressive governments in Latin America, also according to RT. As one would no doubt expect, the U.S. State Department has indicated that they would maintain strong ties with Brazil's new president, a move that is very similar to U.S. actions in Ukraine after the U.S.-sponsored coup in that country, and it caused massive damage to Ukraine and its people, so that the West could begin its demonization of Russia as Putin began taking a stronger position against the actions of the global banking cabal. As long as governments do not act in honorable ways to support the people and the planet, there will always be protests. Just like in Ukraine, there was a group of people who were there to stir up trouble and help create the impression that the leader of a country was bad, so that the media could sell a certain message to the world that would allow controllers to take action. The same thing appears to have happened in Brazil, and it is also now happening in Zimbabwe. But this is a developing story that will be covered in the upcoming weeks. Euronews reported that the impeachment of President Rousseff has sparked both pro- and anti-rallies in several cities across the country. In Sao Paulo, her supporters came out onto the streets, commiserating with each other, accusing Congress of being out of touch with the people. The 61 votes show that Congress is not representative of the Brazilian population, and this type of movement is so important because we are showing Brazil what we want, and that this government does not represent us, said one Rousseff supporter. But what began peacefully later turned violent, the article writes. Anti-riot police used tear gas and even stun grenades to break up crowds of what they identified as Rousseff supporters. The hint as to the agenda of this story comes out in that last sentence, as the intention is to lay blame on Rousseff supporters. Historically, one would never question this. However, after years and years of seeing how governments, media, and police crack down on anyone who questions their power and control over the people, there is a definite pattern to what is happening in Brazil. As was mentioned earlier, Michel Temer has been sworn in officially as the president to finish the term until 2018. As was also mentioned, Temer himself is suspected of various crimes, and some of his ministers have been forced to resign amidst their own scandals. There may have been one silver lining to having Temer in as president, although it is a silver lining smothered by a dark cloud. Given that the global cabal wanted Temer in as a leader, the people who attended the recent Olympic Games in Brazil were very likely safer because of it. Had Rousseff been in power, there would very likely have been some form of sabotage or terrorist event to destabilize the Rousseff government. The deeper story to Brazil is this, and this was reported on CVN back in July. Rousseff was not willing to play by the Western rules of global banking control. Brazil, along with South Africa, are both being destabilized right now because they are the weakest links within a strengthening BRICS alliance of countries and emerging economies. For those unfamiliar with the BRICS alliance, that is the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South African alliance of countries. The alliance, led by Russia and China, are implementing structures and solutions that are directly challenging the U.S. hegemony in the world and also directly challenging the control of the Western bankers by creating their own competing banking institutions. China and Russia have both created international development banks to compete against Western and Western-controlled Asian development banks. They have also created their own systems of international money transfer to circumvent the U.S.-controlled SWIFT system of money transfer. Countries aligning with BRICS are also beginning to do their own trade deals in local currencies without using the U.S. dollar, and this is destroying the role of the U.S. dollar as a global reserve currency. Meanwhile, the Chinese yuan enters into the International Monetary Fund's basket of global currencies this month, further strengthening the role of the yuan against the U.S. dollar in global trade. As well, many countries are beginning to dump the historical debt bonds that have been issued by the U.S., and this is causing a hyperinflation of the domestic U.S. economy dollar, and thus leading to a potential of a U.S. domestic economic crash. Brazil, however, has been standing up to the U.S. in several ways, and thus this is likely why Rousseff found herself to be the target of the U.S. and its allies. Brazil called out the U.S. when revelations from Edward Snowden revealed that the U.S. had been spying on Rousseff and also on key industries, such as the national oil company Petrobras. In response, Brazil began creating its own internet connection to Europe, bypassing the U.S. and its network of spies, much to the dismay of U.S. international intelligence agencies. As always, follow the money and look for the patterns. What is being revealed at this time is the increased desperation of a group of wealthy people trying to hang on to their power and control over the people of the planet and also the planet itself. And they are not able to maintain it because more and more people from more and more countries are beginning to see through the lies, frauds, crimes, and deceptions. And people are uniting enough to send a message to the rest of the world that it is time for this charade of global control to end. So much the better if this can happen as quickly, as comfortably, as safely, and as peacefully as possible for the highest good of all. In other geopolitical news, over the many decades, there have been warnings from time to time from governments to their people telling them to prepare for something, whatever that something was. Over the past week or so, such warnings have now been circulated from 3 European countries, and this is potentially noteworthy. This is also another example of how a story may be seen as either positive or negative, given one's worldview in this moment. Those who live according to the old collapsing or transforming paradigm will very likely see fear, whereas those who understand that the current paradigm is transforming will more likely welcome these changes, even if there is short-term discomfort in going through the transformation. If we are to have a better planet, our current consciousness and way of living has to transform. The more people fear and resist it, the longer and more painful everything will be. Of course, the members of the global cabal could use exactly the same argument to support their agenda also. The difference is whether or not one chooses to live as a slave under their system, or live as a truly free human being within an awakening consciousness upon a planet that is free, abundant, and healthy for all. It was Reuters International News Service that reported the following on August 21st. For the first time since the end of the Cold War, the German government plans to tell citizens to stockpile food and water in case of an attack or catastrophe. The Frankfurter Allgemeine Sonntagszeitung newspaper reported on Sunday. Germany is currently on high alert after 2 Islamist attacks and a shooting rampage by a mentally unstable teenager last month. Berlin announced measures earlier this month to spend considerably more on its police and security forces and to create a special unit to counter cybercrime and terrorism. The population will be obliged to hold an individual supply of food for 10 days. The newspaper quoted the government's concept for civil defense, which has been prepared by the Interior Ministry. What is also added in the story is the following. Germany's defense minister said earlier this month the country lay in the crosshairs of terrorism and pressed for plans for the military to train more closely with police in preparing for potential large-scale militant attacks. Daesh, the terrorist group formerly known as ISIS or the Islamic State, is known to be trained and funded by the U.S. and Israel. It is a proxy group being used to destabilize countries where the U.S. and Israel cannot be seen to be interfering directly. During the Western-created refugee crisis, thousands of alleged refugees were allowed to swarm into many European countries, and this has led to violence on numerous levels as countries and their people were forced to deal with an unnecessary crisis that is being blamed on a religion that has been targeted for no reason since 9/11. Germany has welcomed refugees, and this has made Chancellor Angela Merkel very unpopular with the German people. The German people have been waking up rapidly and are very aware of the U.S. hegemony and the crimes of an unelected EU leadership having control over Germany and its people. Numerous protests over the last year or two have targeted the German leadership, NATO, and also U.S. hegemony, and Germans are increasingly more fed up with it all. It is for this reason that the U.S. may have suggested to Germany to allow a terrorist action of some kind to take place on their soil. However, according to one controversial reporter, Benjamin Fulford, he offered the following insights as to what may be going on in Germany. Fulford wrote that the German government has made a decisive break with the Khazarian mafia and has ordered its citizens to stockpile 10 days' worth of emergency food supplies in preparation for a war of independence, according to both CIA and MI6 sources. In addition, the German government is mobilizing 600,000 militia members in preparation for this war, say his sources. The trigger for this mobilization was a request by the Khazarian-controlled U.S. government for Germany to accept a massive false flag attack on its territory as an excuse for totalitarian Khazarian rule. The Germans have decided to refuse this request and are instead allying themselves with the Russians and effectively joining the UK and Turkey in a Western-led move against the Khazarian-controlled American government, the sources agree. This information can be confirmed in a series of German government statements seen in the corporate media, Fulford continues. These include the announcement of the emergency food supply request, a statement by the German foreign minister that Germany needs to work with Russia, and a statement by the economy minister that the U.S. Khazarian-led transatlantic trade and investment partnership deal agreement was dead in the water. The German move is just the opening salvo, writes Fulford, of what is expected to be a decisive campaign to permanently end Khazarian control of the West and its remaining slave states. Expect similar moves in many countries as the autumn offensive against the final Khazarian mafia strongholds goes into full gear. As a follow-up to the German announcement, the victoraslibertas.com website reported that just days after the German government advised citizens to stock up on food and water, the Czech government has followed suit. Czech news channel CT24 broadcast a message from their government telling citizens to prepare for the worst. Czech media sources are reporting that in the event of a national crisis, the food needs of the country will not be met, as the Czech Republic is already beset by food shortages. A link to a short video will appear in the show summary from an individual in the Czech Republic reporting on this. It was then reported on August 29th from the Norwegian Defence League website that now Finland is warning its citizens too to stockpile large quantities of food and water. Something bad is coming. The Western media and its controllers would like people to believe that a war with Russia is coming. Behind the scenes, as CVN has been trying to share over the last year especially, and that was hinted by Fulford above, there appear to be plans to not only expose, but begin to take down the global cabal led by the Khazarian mafia. Many different chess moves are being played out on many different levels. Many well-intentioned people share information thinking they have it all figured out, when it is abundantly clear that they do not have it figured out, and what's worse, they cannot admit that they have not got it all figured out. There are very few, if any, people on this planet who truly and completely have it all figured out. I certainly do not have it all figured out, and I am not naive enough to tell you that I have it all figured out. This would not be an honorable thing to do. I am doing my very best as a journalist to offer the perspectives that the Western media do not offer, and I try to bring together many of the dots so that you can connect them in a way that is meaningful to you to support your worldview, or perhaps even to help modify it, if that is what you feel in your heart. Please do not accept what I share as truth unless the information feels meaningful to you in this current moment. We are going through a period of intense revelation and change. This change can manifest in any one of a number of ways. If humanity reacts with fear, anger, hatred, and revenge, it will not be good for humanity and our planet. We have to do our best to see what is happening and the opportunities that are now being presented for humanity to take control of its collective future as peacefully as possible, but it also requires humans to step out of their normal defensive and aggressive actions and work together to create new solutions, and only to resort to defensive actions if and when it is as a last resort. As we will hear at the end of the newscast, it is vital to keep a vision in your heart of a peaceful, healthy planet, and people living in abundance and service to each other and the planet. As impossible as it may seem right now, the changes happening on our planet are proof that the global cabal no longer has the power it once had. It is therefore up to us to lead by example. One event that has the potential to kickstart energies of change in September is the G20 Summit, getting underway on September 4th for 2 days in Hangzhou, China. According to the official website, the presidents, prime ministers, and leaders of the following countries and organizations will be in attendance. We have China, Argentina, Brazil, France, Indonesia, South Korea, Mexico, Russia, South Africa, Turkey, the US, Australia, Canada, Germany, India, Italy, Japan, the UK, the European Council, the European Commission, Saudi Arabia, Chad, Egypt, Kazakhstan, Laos, Senegal, Singapore, Spain, Thailand, the UN Secretary General, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, the International Labor Organization, the Financial Stability Board, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Several smaller countries have been invited to the meeting at the request of China, and this may raise some questions as to the strategy that China plans to lay out to the Western countries at this meeting. The Chinese yuan, already rumored to be gold-backed, is expected to join the IMF's basket of global currencies known as the Special Drawing Rights at the end of September. At that time, it is also believed that China will immediately have greater influence over the price of gold, even more so than they are believed to have now, as a result of China setting up their own gold fix for setting the price of gold several months ago. One possible story of interest to note about the G20 involving Canada. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau left a number of days early for China, flying out on August 29th, a full 5 days before the G20 was scheduled to begin. Now, this may or may not mean anything. Benjamin Fulford, mentioned earlier, speculated that Trudeau would be going to China early. He had this to say about Trudeau. The Chinese, for their part, have given up on Hillary, and since they have no love for Republican candidate Donald Trump, they are now considering a more radical move. They have invited Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to visit China before the big September 4th to 5th meeting that the Chinese are hosting. Sources in Asian secret societies say the Chinese will ask Trudeau if he would be interested in leading a Mexican-American-Canadian North American alliance. It is not clear, however, just how aware of reality Trudeau is. The Canadian corporate press parrots its U.S. counterparts like the New York Times in presenting outright lies as fact. In their worldview, it was not the Saudis and their Bush-Clinton allies who used sarin gas in Syria, but rather the quote-unquote dictator Assad. Trudeau may also still believe that Putin actually invaded Crimea when Russia did not. Fulford writes that it is quite possible Trudeau is still too brainwashed to understand the historical opportunity the Asians are going to offer him. The BRICS Post publicly is reporting that Trudeau wants to improve relations with China. One possible good sign, however, was reported on August 30th when CTV News in Canada reported that Canada had signaled its intent to join the controversial Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank set up by China. Assuming this to be true, this would signal yet another U.S. ally that is breaking ranks with the U.S. to join the Chinese bank. Zero Hedge notes another item of interest that is related to the G20. Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi, who will be in attendance at the summit, will soon be facing his own possible fate in Italy when an important referendum will be coming up in that country relating to Italy's future. The article writes that this vote in Italy needs to go on your economic radar screen. If the no vote wins, Renzi has promised to resign. This would throw Italy into a political crisis. Then there would be a real potential to elect parties that would call for a vote on whether to stay in the European Union. And at this point, it is not clear what the Italians would decide to do. Know this, the European Monetary Union does not work very well, if at all, without Italy. A no vote would mean the death knell of the euro. Another note to pay attention to is an upcoming election in one of the German states, the state that happens to be the home constituency of Chancellor Angela Merkel. A Zero Hedge article on the 1st of September reports that Merkel's Christian Democratic Union Party is on the verge of a very embarrassing defeat in her home state. There has been a rise in support for the anti-immigration Alternative for Germany Party, or the AfD. The will of the German people may be about to overtake and shadow Merkel's political career. What we are seeing is this. The European Community Project is failing. What was perhaps once a good idea, has become fatally corrupted by greed, cronyism, and unelected power. It appears that the EU is fracturing, and the cabal NATO powers know this. Therefore, the refugee crisis was staged to stir up the flames of protest, anger, and violence, so that calls would come for more military control and protection. It appears to be working in some countries like Sweden, but it also appears to be failing in some other countries like Hungary, Germany, and maybe a few others. So it remains to be seen what chess moves will be played over the coming weeks and how these moves will succeed or fail, given the planetary and astrological energies at this time that are breaking down cabal controls. Just for the record, I still shake my head in disbelief that leaders of the world waste millions upon millions of dollars in security and extravagance to host and attend meetings like these for only a few days. Why should taxpayers have to pay for this kind of waste? In financial news now, the hints are coming out in this sector also that September and October could be very wild months. We start first with an article appearing on RT.com on August 29th. According to this article, weak corporate earnings, a banking crisis, and the Brexit vote are forcing banks to prepare for the worst-case scenario in the second half of the year. According to CNBC, quoting a major lender, banks are preparing for an economic nuclear winter situation. The article continues, after the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union in June, there have been talks a similar referendum may be held in France, the Netherlands, and other countries. Markets hate uncertainty, and the events this year have unfortunately created a lot of mystery around what is going to happen next, the source added. Shares in the biggest banks have been plummeting. Deutsche Bank has lost almost 45%, Credit Suisse has lost 41%, and the Royal Bank of Scotland went down 35% in 2016. Uncertainty and volatility has been spotted in all areas of the economy, from mining to car production. One has to keep in mind that if there is information being made public, it is being made public for a reason. For example, statements made by J.P. Morgan in 1929 led to the bank runs that caused the Great Depression. With people like Jacob Rothschild and George Soros being quoted on mainstream media, you can be sure that if they are saying something, it is likely because they want something to happen and very likely have placed their bets on the stock markets that it will happen. After all, that is what good little sheep do when they trust everything that governments and mainstream media say to them, and this is why it is taking so long for things to change for the better on our planet. Where things start to get a bit confusing is in the area of gold. CVN has reported that many countries are in the process of moving towards reintroducing the gold standard in international banking. I still do believe personally that this is happening. So some listeners may get confused when a story is reported about gold not being made available. A Zero Hedge news website reported on September 2nd that in the latest stunning development involving a documented failure of a bank to deliver physical gold when demanded, yesterday, we, Zero Hedge, reported that according to a German website, goodmode-trader.de, a client of the etc. gold exchange traded commodity was told that the fund's designated sponsor, Deutsche Bank, would be unable to deliver the requested gold. Two other alternative radio news sources, Dave of the X22 Report and V, the Guerrilla Economists, both share their respective opinions about what is happening here with Deutsche Bank.
We see Deutsche Bank right now. They were unable to satisfy a gold delivery request when asked to do so by a client. And this is coming from Citra's Gold Service. What is Citra Gold? They are a public traded company, and they provide investors with an efficient instrument to participate in the performance of the gold market. And Citra's Gold They have cost-efficient trading, and individuals, the clients, have the right to have their gold physically delivered to them. And what happens here is that the physical gold is held in custody for the issuer in the Frankfurt vaults of Clearstream Banking. This is a wholly owned subsidiary of Deutsche Bank. In order to facilitate the delivery of physical gold, the issuer holds a further limited amount of gold on an unallocated weight account with Umicore. And what we're seeing right now is that the company, Citra, makes a promise. Investors always have the possibility of demanding delivery of their securitized amount of gold per bearer note against the issuer. And the delivery of gold, they have the right to have their gold delivered. And we can see right now, Deutsche Bank, they said no. They said, we are not going to deliver the gold. They backed out of this. We can see right now, since the introduction of Citra Gold in 2007, investors have exercised this right 900 times, with a total of about 4.5 tons of gold delivered. And now, it's completely changed. Deutsche Bank account executives informed the investors that the service is no longer offered. That's odd, strange. And it looks like this Citra Gold is just one gigantic paper scheme, just like all the others. And when all these individuals try to get their gold, and they're holding a piece of paper saying they have this gold, they are never going to get it. That's why you need to own physical from the start.
They are really, really giving a clear warning sign. There's a massive problem in the system. And one of the things you got to understand about the physical gold market, it's the most controlled, especially when you get to the higher levels of like sovereign wealth funds, central banks, and large institutions that invest in LBMA certified gold bars, which are everything. That's the creme de la creme of all the gold bars on the planet. It's the most highly scrutinized, most heavily audited, regulated, you name it. So for Deutsche Bank to say that they don't have the gold, they're not delivering it, simply means they don't have it upon delivery for the customers. And this is one of the biggest warnings that I myself and a lot of others have been trying to put out there for quite some time. And that is that if you have your gold held with a bank, you're in trouble. You're in trouble big, because the bank's fine letters on their agreements state they are not responsible. So this is a huge, huge turn of events, and it's a signal to the end of the gold manipulation cartel as we're going into the fall. This is going to be the craziest next 2 months. I recommend people brace themselves. And I told you guys back in January, this was going to be the summer chaos before anybody else has called it. And the economic events as well have been tantamount to incredible and paradigm altering. Get ready for this fall. You got a text message from a cohort of mine, a very well connected individual. All I can tell you, okay, is certain rats have left the ship and they are gone. As of this morning or by the end of this week, a lot of them will be gone. I'm not saying this to panic anybody, but these are key players on the international stage that understand what is coming. So this fall, I estimate to be critical. I'm not talking about Russian troops invading. That's a bunch of BS. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Chinese submarines off the coast of Florida and California launching ICBMs at you. No. What I'm talking about is something's happening. And even when I talked to W as well, his sources have said that the October surprise will not be financial, even though there will be some financial events taking place. The big hit is not going to be on the financial stage. It will be on the geopolitical stage. So Deutsche Bank, that's a huge thing, guys. This is going to cascade, and it's going to get even further into the grander scheme of things. So these are some serious events. I mean, the BRICS have been rattled. It's not even the BRICS so much. I mean, it's Brazil, it's South Africa. Africa's always had problems, always been unstable. But we'll see how things begin.
Zero Hedge reported in the same article that etc. issued an official response to the Zero Hedge story, essentially blaming Deutsche Bank for the problem. The article goes on to basically support the information shared by Dave and V that you heard moments ago, that etc. is basically issuing paper gold. The Zero Hedge article closes with the following. Our take, meaning Zero Hedge's opinion, is slightly different. While we already know that physical delivery at Deutsche Bank appears to have been compromised, according to Deutsche Börse response, The ability of any and every other bank in Germany to deliver gold is now likewise questionable, which begs the question, where is all the physical gold? Deutsche Bank issued its own official statement on September the 2nd, again reported by ZeroHedge.com, and the response amounted to almost nothing meaningful. That article writes that another non-response, because in the same press release, Deutsche Bank both admits that it has an obligation to deliver the gold as a matter of course, and then tacitly confirms that it failed to do so, by first saying that it evaluates the economic efficiency of physical delivery, something it should have no right to do, since the etc. prospectus explicitly mandates that it should release gold on demand, and then adds that should an investor's request for the handover of physical gold not have been complied with immediately in individual cases, this will be reviewed and an individual solution will be found with the client. As we already know, the handover of physical gold failed on at least one occasion, and while we are comforted that Deutsche Bank is reviewing the situation and a solution will be found with the client, it certainly does not even remotely explain why the situation should have arisen in the first place. However, as Zero Hedge continues, what is most notable is how quickly every entity involved in this failure to deliver, from etc. Gold to Deutsche Börse and ultimately to Deutsche Bank, how they responded with an attempt to placate public concerns about the availability of physical gold, with statements that may have, paradoxically, only raised concerns whether the gold is in fact still there. These are the kinds of reports where people come to me and to others asking that if we're so sure we're moving to a gold standard economy, why is there no gold? Again, unless someone has been following numerous other geopolitical and geoeconomic events, one is not likely going to be able to connect the dots to understand the bigger picture. The Western media has not been reporting extensively that countries like Russia and China have been buying up massive amounts for their gold reserves. Likewise, also, they are not reporting that as more and more gold is collected, more and more U.S. Treasury debt bonds are sold off, forcing the U.S. Federal Reserve to buy back these bonds from their formerly secret fund called the ESF, the Exchange Stabilization Fund. It has been alleged that this secret fund was started as a result of Executive Order 6102 issued by then-President Franklin D. Roosevelt back in the 30s that led to the confiscation of everything gold at that time. It is believed that all the confiscated gold was put into this fund and the world was never told about it. Yet now we see a major German bank essentially doing the same thing, confiscating gold, or at least trying to cover up the fact that they never had the gold in the first place. To take down the global banking cabal, a complicated game was necessary, and the pieces are moving into place for the Western system to be bankrupted, and numerous sources are already suggesting that the Western system is already bankrupt, and has been for some time. Those who are connected with bringing in the new financial system are allegedly helping to keep the current system on life support, and when the time is right, the plug will be pulled, and the old system will go offline, and a new system will come online. Paul Mason, writing for the London Guardian back in July of last year, noted the coming demise of capitalism as we currently experience it. As companies and governments continue to market the lie that the global economy can recover within a system of banking that mathematically cannot recover because it was never designed to recover, and the world is changing in several fundamental ways. Mason hints at what they are, even though he appears unable to explain exactly why or how these things were able to come to pass. Mason wrote that capitalism, it turns out, will not be abolished by forced march techniques. It will be abolished by creating something more dynamic that exists, at first, almost unseen within the old system, but which will break through, reshaping the economy around new values and behaviors. He calls this post-capitalism. He continues, as with the end of feudalism 500 years ago, capitalism's replacement by post-capitalism will be accelerated by external shocks and shaped by the emergence of a new kind of human being. And it has started. Post-capitalism is possible because of three major changes information technology has brought about in the past 25 years. First, it has reduced the need for work, blurred the edges between work and free time, and loosened the relationship between work and wages. The coming wave of automation, currently stalled because our social infrastructure cannot bear the consequences, will hugely diminish the amount of work needed, not just to subsist, but to provide a decent life for all. Mason continues, second, information is corroding the market's ability to form prices correctly. That is because markets are based on scarcity, while information is abundant. The system's defense mechanism is to form monopolies, the giant tech companies, on a scale not seen in the past 200 years, and yet they cannot last. Third, writes Mason, we're seeing the spontaneous rise of collaborative production. Goods, services, and organizations are appearing that no longer respond to the dictates of the market and the managerial hierarchy. The biggest information product in the world, Wikipedia, is made by volunteers for free. Mason adds that almost unnoticed in the niches and hollows of the market system, whole swaths of economic life are beginning to move to a different rhythm. Parallel currencies, time banks, cooperatives, and self-managed spaces have proliferated, barely noticed by the economics profession, and often as a direct result of the shattering of the old structures in the post-2008 financial crisis. He uses Greece as an example, pointing out how projects and initiatives are popping up because people are doing what those in control were not expecting them to do, work and cooperate together. Mason writes that they exist because they trade, however haltingly and inefficiently, in the currency of post-capitalism, free time, networked activity, and free stuff. New forms of ownership, new forms of lending, new legal contracts. A whole business subculture has emerged over the past 10 years, which the media has dubbed the sharing economy. The people, by necessity, are creating solutions, although North Americans have not been told this. Such is the reality that North Americans may come to learn more about in the coming months, and it will not be a bad thing. If one understands how important it is for the old system to go, then everything that happens should be seen as a very good thing, even if there is a short-term pain associated with it. It is part of the healing process, and we created the whole thing through our direct and indirect participation within it. Another possible strong signal of major change shaking things up comes the report this week from Reuters News Service on August 31st that South Korea's Hanjin Shipping Company Limited filed for court receivership on the 31st after losing the support of its banks, setting the stage for its assets to be frozen as ports from China to Spain denied access to its vessels. Banks led by state-run Korea Development Bank withdrew backing for the world's seventh largest container carrier on Tuesday, saying a funding plan by its parent group was inadequate to tackle the debt that stood at $5 billion at the end of 2015. Reuters adds that the court will now decide whether Hanjin Shipping should remain as a going concern or be dissolved, a process that usually takes 1 or 2 months, but is expected to be accelerated in Hanjin's case, the judge said. A bankruptcy for Hanjin Shipping would be the largest ever for a container shipper in terms of capacity, according to consultancy Alphaliner, exceeding the 1986 collapse of United States lines. Global shipping firms have been swamped by overcapacity and sluggish demand, with Hanjin booking a net loss of 473 billion won, that's the South Korean currency, in the first half of the year. The Zero Hedge News website added the following to the story, also on the 31st, writing that shares in Hanjin Shipping have been suspended after plunging 24% on Tuesday. The global implications from the bankruptcy are unknown if, as expected, the company's ships remain frozen and inaccessible for weeks, if not months. The impact on global supply chains will be devastating, potentially resulting in a cascading waterfall effect, whose impact on global economies could be severe as a result of the worldwide logistics chaos. To the untrained ear, a report of this nature will seem fearful, and it may cause some to worry about the future. Again, there are solutions that will arise once the powers preventing those solutions are removed from having their power. This is hard to explain to those who are only now beginning to understand that our current economic health is not as good as certain countries and leaders and media are trying to make it out to be. As long as there is any rope left to hold on to, the cabal will do whatever they can to keep their dysfunctional and dying system intact. Only when their last breath has been drawn will the system transition to something new. Therefore, we will have to go through the waiting as the cabal's death rattle continues until it is heard no longer. Looking to disclosure-related news for the week, although there are so many who are still not yet convinced that civilizations of a non-Earth origin have been interacting on Earth, there are many sources beginning to share their direct experiences for those people who are ready and willing to look for that information. There are enough qualified people from many high-level positions and even positions of great secrecy. CVN has covered this extensively over the years it has been on the air. There are sources, messages, and videos coming out now that try to offer further evidence of the presence of our galactic families acting in ways to help humanity. To be fair, CVN is of the belief that there are both positive and not so positive members of our galactic families, just as there are humans who act in life-honoring and non-life-honoring ways. However, both have a very important role to fulfill, and we are both groups, that is, we are all connected as one. Although it is ultimately up to each individual human to decide in her or his heart what is true, an argument could be made that there are now benevolent galactic forces assisting humanity in taking down the cabal group that has been enslaving humanity and destroying our planet. I do not ask anyone to believe this, but instead try to listen to what your gut instinct tells you and trust that, even if it means that you choose to disagree with me and with possibly hundreds of thousands of others. One possible example of this occurred within the last few days. A video has surfaced from Cape Canaveral where a rocket was on a launch pad and was scheduled to launch on September the 3rd. According to an article posted on the TechCrunch website on September the 1st, a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket exploded during a test on a launch pad at Cape Canaveral. This rocket was set to launch on Saturday, September the 3rd, on a mission to deliver Facebook's first satellite to orbit. This rocket was scheduled to launch the Amos 6 communication satellite, which, among other functions, included the capabilities for Facebook, the social media network, to spot beam broadband for Facebook's Internet.org initiative. Facebook and France-based satellite provider Eutelsat spent $95 million for a 5-year lease on the satellite's Ka-band communication array. A Facebook spokesperson was quoted in the article as saying that we are disappointed by the loss, but remain committed to our mission of connecting people to the internet around the world. An article on the Globe and Mail News website on September 1st by Ivan Semeniuk reported that the explosion of the SpaceX rocket during a pre-launch test on Thursday is reverberating across the global space industry, less than a year before the same type of rocket is set to carry crew members to the International Space Station. The Falcon 9 rocket exploded during fueling operations. According to Elon Musk, the explosion originated around the upper stage oxygen tank, and the cause is still unknown. The Falcon rocket had been planned to start transporting astronauts to the International Space Station in 2017. The Globe article also notes that more immediately, the loss of the Amos 6 satellite in Thursday's mishap is a devastating development for its Israeli-based operator, Spacecom. Last week, Space News, which covers the aerospace industry, reported that Beijing Xinhua Technology Group of China had agreed to buy the Israeli Spacecom, but the sale was contingent on the successful launch of Amos 6. The loss of the satellite is also a blow for Facebook. As mentioned, the social media company was planning to use the satellite to expand its coverage in Africa. A number of satellite launches during September and October will likely be placed on indefinite hold. To look at the video, most people would never notice the suspiciously odd things that occurred. Links to several videos will appear in the show summary for this story, and hopefully they will not get removed. One video shows a slow motion replay, and the dots are still hard to see. On the second video, one has to be quick with the play and pause buttons to catch the moving objects. If one goes to the 1 minute 8 second mark and then begins to alternate the play and pause buttons, you may notice a few odd things for the next 5 seconds. At the 1 minute 9 second mark, a black dot moves extremely quickly along the bottom of the window, entering the view from the right side and moving to the left. At the 1:11 mark, another black dot enters from the right, moving towards the left at a higher level, just as the explosion of the rocket begins. An observant individual, Candido Pedro Jorge, posting in Facebook, also noted something odd about the explosion. He posted his comment, saying, "Very strange. Typically, accidents like this don't begin precisely in the launcher vehicle's payload." If one looks closely at the explosion begins near the top of the rocket, where there is usually no fuel, although an explosion could open up a hole where the fuel could then be ignited. As I am not an expert in the design of this rocket, it is not my place to say that there is no fuel immediately below the payload compartment, but it seems very strange that the explosion would occur higher up on the rocket when most of the more volatile or explosive components would be located closer to the bottom of the rocket. As we heard a moment ago, Elon Musk was apparently quoted as saying that the oxygen tank was located at the higher end of the rocket, and this represents a little bit of concern and maybe suspicion as to what may have really taken place. You have to be really quick with the play and pause buttons to catch the moving black dots, but if you are quick enough, you can catch the dots at least twice in 2 different parts of the screen, and this would be considered odd because these objects cannot be seen by the naked eye when played at normal speed. Another website, thelightreports.com, offers a slow motion replay and also posted the following information. Pay attention to the top of the second tower on the right. A UFO enters the screen going right to left at super high speed the moment the rocket and its payload explodes. The payload was the target, and they hit it there to send a clear message that it wasn't an O-ring failure. Now, those who are wondering why the O-ring was mentioned specifically may recall that NASA claimed that it was the failure of an O-ring that resulted in at least one of the shuttle explosions years ago. It is not my place to tell you what the objects are, or what their purpose was, or why the explosion occurred where it did. All I can tell you is that the video presents an argument that something odd took place, and given the payload and the company that owns the payload, it may make one ask if there really are forces attempting to assist humanity by taking down corporate interests with an agenda that may not be honorable for humanity and the planet. Over to science and tech-related news now. We look at a science-related story dealing with the benefits of hemp. CVN has long been reporting the value and importance of hemp as a crop that can help change the planet almost literally overnight. It is also why the crop has been criminalized, because those in control of big pharma, big oil, big medicine, and other industries stand to lose billions in profits were this crop to be allowed to be grown in every community, allowing that community to basically become self-sustaining and healthy, and therefore not requiring the lemonade the cabal is serving for people to drink. It is important to begin to understand the value of hemp in light of the mass global campaign going on with regard to global warming. If one were to go back far enough in history, one would find that the Earth has gone through various shifts and phases. Our planet is currently going through a shift towards a higher vibration, and if one chooses to believe certain sources, these changes will mean that our planet is moving towards a more temperate global climate. What this means is that the polar regions will begin to lose their ice mass. Assuming this is true for a moment, this represents one more nail in the coffin of their control over humanity and the planet. What it also represents is another opportunity for the global cabal to try to trick humanity into giving up more money and power under the fear of destruction to our environment. I do not ask anyone to accept what I'm about to share. My personal feeling, based on what I think I know up to now, is this. Yes, there is a lot of CO2 in our atmosphere. It is also my understanding that plants and trees breathe in this CO2 and convert it to oxygen, and the oxygen is exhaled from the trees and plants. Therefore, CO2, carbon dioxide, is necessary for the survival of trees and plants on our planet. The real problem, as I am perceiving it, is this. It is not the amount of carbon dioxide going up into the atmosphere that is the real problem. It is the rate of destruction of our rainforests, our coral reefs, and other trees and plants to support numerous industries for global profit. If the environment that breathes CO2 was not being destroyed simultaneously to the addition of CO2 to the atmosphere, there would not be the problem we are experiencing today. Therefore, I see the global warming campaign as a fraud by the global elites to extract more money from people to fight a perceived problem, while the same people refuse to stop cutting down the very resources that could deal with the same CO2 problem. The CO2 is being put up in large part by the burning of coal and oil, and yet big oil continues to lobby governments to maintain the use of oil at the expense of our planet. If the cabal is going to take our money to fight a problem that they themselves are creating and not stopping, this, at least to me, constitutes a criminal scam of epic proportions. However, this may just be me. The solution, however, is extremely easy, if it were not for the powerful interests that do not want this solution introduced. An article appearing on the hempnewstv.wordpress.com website from October of 2009 noted the following. The hemp plant can be used in thousands of different products, including large-scale things such as houses and cars. Hemp is also to be made into smaller goods as well, from health products to paints. An extremely important goal that hemp must be applied to immediately is the reversal of global warming, as utilizing hemp on a massive scale could indeed achieve this objective. The nature of the hemp plant enables it to absorb incredible amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, much more than all other plants. Hemp can not only absorb carbon dioxide, but it puts much of it into the soil. This not only permanently removes it from the atmosphere, but it enhances the soil. Few other plants leave the soil healthier after they have grown, rather than depleting it. Not only is hemp effective at reversing global warming through its growth, but the processing of it into its various products that are green as well. Hemp is especially efficient when it comes to paper. The key points are these. Hemp can absorb more CO2 than in any other plant. It can take CO2 out of the atmosphere and put it into the soil, which enhances the soil for agriculture. And it can be processed into an almost infinite number of green products, which also contribute to removing CO2 from the atmosphere, such as hempcrete for construction. In a second article posted on the same page, it explores further the use of hemp as a solution. This article writes that longtime hemp activist Jack Herer is offering a $100,000 reward of sorts to anyone who can disprove his hypothesis that hemp is a silver bullet for climate change. Here's Herer. He is quoted as saying, "If all fossil fuels and their derivatives, as well as trees for paper and construction, were banned in order to save the planet, reverse the greenhouse effect, and stop deforestation, then there is only one known annually renewable natural resource that is capable of providing the overall majority of the world's paper and textiles, meet all of the world's transportation, industrial, and home energy needs, while simultaneously reducing pollution, rebuilding the soil, and cleaning the atmosphere all at the same time. That substance is the same one that has done it before, cannabis hemp. Anyone who can prove this statement wrong is entitled to $100,000 US. A third article on the same page explores more the science behind carbon dioxide reduction and hemp. This article writes that our basic premise is that hemp is far more productive than typical agroforestry projects, producing annual, versatile biomass alongside more rapid CO2 uptake. It can produce a vast range of sustainable raw materials with an overall low environmental impact, as well as improving soil structure using low fertilizer and no other chemical inputs. Hemp could be used to replace significant quantities of tree-derived products, allowing reduced use of existing tree populations, thus maintaining their carbon dioxide uptake. The third article offers more statistical information for those who are interested in understanding the numbers behind the use of hemp in combating the alleged global warming. The statistics are conservative and are based on companies in the United Kingdom. Among all the statistics are the following final numbers. 1.37 tons of carbon dioxide is absorbed for every ton of hemp stem. 11.25 tons of carbon dioxide is absorbed for every hectare of plant in the UK. 1.4 to 2.06 tons of carbon dioxide are absorbed per hectare from the hemp roots and leaves. The article adds that hemp also produces much higher quantities of stronger and more versatile fiber than cotton and many other fiber crops, which often have very high chemical residue and water footprints. Hemp does not require as much water. Extra processing required by hemp is also at least partially offset by its recycling potential. This is just a small sample of the vital importance this plant can play, not only in cleaning the air on our planet, but also in creating the self-sustaining green economy that can take the power away from corporate and elitist interests, seeking to keep humanity enslaved to their dangerous economic paradigm that puts profits ahead of human and planetary health. It is up to the people to become more informed and then to begin questioning leaders while sharing ideas within their communities so people can begin to take back their own power and provide for their own needs in a way that benefits both humanity and the planet. Finally, in health-related news, we take a look at spiritual health, which is what we often do on this newscast, as it is becoming increasingly more important as people begin to feel symptoms of things they may not fully understand or be able to explain. The importance is that people can do some inner work to understand if what they are feeling really requires medical attention or whether it is part of a physical shift within one's body to adapt to shifting energies of the planet and human consciousness. If one feels the need to seek medical attention, then it is important to do so for one's peace of mind. If one is good at knowing and trusting one's intuition, perhaps one can arrive at one's own answers. An article appearing on the Gnostica.com website on July 13th offered insights on becoming a crystal human. Now, I realize this will not mean a lot to many new listeners, but perhaps over time they will become more familiar with this. The article offers 11 symptoms that one can observe within oneself to determine if one's body is adapting to the incoming higher frequencies that so many are now noticeably experiencing. People adapt differently, and some more dramatically than others. This may be due to the soul contract of the individual to receive something a certain way. It may also be due to the fact that an individual has been resisting the changes for a long period of time, and the body is reacting more dramatically due to the symptoms being ignored. According to the article, the following is a list of symptoms experienced in the process of crisis or breakthrough. The article writes, number 1, a sudden extreme sensitivity to people and environments. A person who has previously been sociable and active suddenly finds that one cannot bear to be in shopping malls or in crowded environments such as restaurants. Number 2, an increase in psychic ability and awareness. This most often manifests in the ability to almost hear the inner thoughts and feelings of others. This can be disconcerting if the person imagines that everyone else can also read their thoughts and feelings. Number 3, an extreme sensitivity to negative energy in certain environments or people, including the inability to tolerate certain people who had previously been close. This increased sensitivity can lead to panic attacks or anxiety attacks. These can occur at any time, even when the person wakes up at night. Often, there is no valid reason for the attack, although the person will often seek to find a reason. Number 4, the person might also find themselves zoning out for long periods of time, just wanting to sit and do nothing. This can be irritating to someone who has previously been very energetic and active. This is just the consciousness adjusting to spending more time in the higher dimensions and less time in the third and fourth dimensions. Related to this is the need to rest and sleep for far longer than previously, and a general slowing down. Number 5, obsessive anxieties about humans being destroyed by pollution, lack of resources, aliens, technology, etc. This is because multidimensional consciousness can access all levels of the group mind, including that part which holds the fears and anxieties about the survival of the species. Since the person is often concerned about one's own survival, one tends to resonate with this part of the group mind or morphogenetic field. Number 6, an obsessive need to understand what is happening. This leads to the mind becoming overactive and the person fearing that one is losing it or suffering from burnout. Also a fear of going mad and being unable to cope with everyday life in the future. Again, psychologists and doctors seem able to offer very little help in this regard. Number 7, depression for no reason or related to the crisis state. This is often just the consciousness clearing out old layers of energy that need to be released. It is not necessary to process or relive the experience, just allow the body to release the energy. Have patience with the process and know that it will pass. Number 8, disrupted sleep patterns. Often waking up 3 times a night or just about 3 a.m. Again, this is just the consciousness adapting to new cycles of activity. Higher consciousness is often more active at night since the lower dimensions are quiet at this time. Feeling strange electrical waves through the body. The crystal body is incredibly sensitive and feels solar and lunar waves, cosmic waves, and energies from the galactic center. Often, these energies are assisting in the process of rewiring the body to carry higher energies. Number 9, a whole range of physical sensations and experiences, usually related to detoxification. The crystal body holds no toxins, but allows everything to pass through it. In fact, the eventual trick to being crystal is just to allow everything to pass through and hold on to nothing. The ultimate state of detachment. But at this stage, the body needs to release years of toxic waste, whether physical, emotional, or mental. The release is always through the physical body, which presents symptoms such as intense fatigue, muscle and joint pains, especially in the hips and knees, headaches, especially at the base of the skull, and neck and shoulder pains. Increased appetite. This is number 10 now. Number 10, increased appetite and putting on weight. This is because the body needs huge amounts of energy to power this process. And number 11, the ability to see beyond the veils. That is, to become aware of spirits, devas, ETs, and angels as a reality, and to communicate with them. This can be very frightening if the person is not accustomed to this kind of other dimensional awareness. Now, I think I can say that I have personally experienced at least 8 of them, and maybe 1 or 2 more on a subconscious level. The symptoms are apparently very positive in nature, and are an indication that one is transforming into a galactic human, and therefore this is something worthy of celebration, although it may change one's own world dramatically, just by being aware of all this. How one adapts is completely up to that individual. By way of an announcement this week, many listeners may wonder why I am not commenting on the U.S. election, nor am I commenting much on the investigations into the Clinton Foundation. I want listeners to know that I am keeping an eye on stories relating to these subjects. However, I am choosing not to give attention to this charade known as the U.S. election. What I personally believe and feel is this: there will not be an election in November, at least in its current form, with the current candidates. It is my personal feeling that the reason this year's election campaign has become such a charade is because there is something else going on in the background, and people are getting too wound up and emotional in the distraction relating to this election campaign to pay attention to what is really going on. I do not want to be responsible for supporting this charade, and therefore I am choosing not to feed the energies of distraction, anger, and fear that so many are experiencing from this campaign. If you want news about the election, please feel free to go elsewhere. If there is something meaningful and significant to report that does not feed the fear and distraction-based agenda, I will consider sharing it. For now, please know and understand that this is a journalistic choice that I am making of my own free will, and I feel it important to say this to everyone so that I am in integrity with those who may claim that I am biased in not covering this election. In this week's final words. So, it seems that there are a number of sources that are indicating their belief that the month of September is going to represent a tipping point in the shift of consciousness from the older disappearing paradigm and the emerging paradigm that supports a much more aware and compassionate humanity with a higher planetary consciousness. That could be considered a very diplomatic way of expressing the unfolding shift according to whatever belief one may have within the context of his or her current system of belief, be it religious, spiritual, or other. There may be newer listeners who are not quite on board with the idea of a shifting human and planetary consciousness, and this is perfectly okay. Regular listeners will know that each individual is within her or his unique space of awareness and understanding, and will be drawn to information and messengers when they are ready for it. Those that feel they are not ready for the following information are invited to simply set it aside, because maybe it will have more meaning in some future moment. I was reminded recently in a conversation with a friend about how I communicated information about global change to her years ago. It sounded more fearful to her at the time, although this was not my intention. What I was energetically tapping into was the possibility of certain timelines unfolding, but what I was lacking more at that time was the ability to discern the disinformation from the information. There are elements of truth in all messages, and also elements of disinformation, and each individual will discern what is truth for him or her in that current moment of now. However, things change, and things that I observed then are still unfolding, but they are not necessarily unfolding in the way that I saw them unfolding at that time. The shifting consciousness has a way of changing this, and I am more aware of this now. The end goal of change cannot be avoided, but how and when we get there is dependent upon my choices, but also those of each human in honoring humanity and the planet. It is extremely complicated to try to explain global change, not only from the bigger picture perspective of all the truth that is being exposed at this time, but also from the bigger perspective of why these shifts and events are happening at this time and how they are impacting each human in a way that is uniquely and beautifully different to each individual according to his or her current worldview in any moment. The mainstream media does not do journalism any justice, and it is impossible to connect the dots of global events when media outlets are more interested in sensationalized stories that will pay for their broadcasts, as opposed to offering meaningful information that people can use when they are ready for it. Quantum science has begun preparing humans for the knowledge that our reality is not how we have been taught to understand it. It is a reality that is more fluid than we have been allowed to know, and it is also a reality that consists of multiple timelines and possibilities that exist on both individual levels and also on the level of collective humanity. Sources have speculated that many, if not all, of the more destructive timelines have now been eliminated because enough humans are beginning to question and stand up against the negativity of the group known as the Global Cabal. This does not necessarily mean, however, that there will be no negative events, because there are humans who still require certain experiences and lessons to guide them in their personal growth and awakening. I am referring more to the particular timeline of events that will see massive destruction upon the planet. Most esoteric and spiritual sources seem to agree that Earth and humanity are heading towards a very positive ending once we can clear out all the remaining negativity of our current reality and frequency of existing. Change can happen quickly or it can happen more slowly. Historically, change has been very slow, often over one or more generations, as information is shared among people. In today's world, information is being shared much more quickly, leading to an awakening worldwide that is unprecedented, at least within our current lifetime. It has been said that we are receiving help from numerous sources, including the various astrological alignments, as well as assistance from various physical and non-physical entities existing beyond, upon, and within our planet. If it helps, try to think about two different roads going to the same city. One road may be a large freeway that is more direct and cars can travel at higher rates of speed and it takes very little time. Another road is smaller and it goes through smaller towns and may have many curves as it passes through a mountain. This second road may take much longer. It has been said that until recently, humanity was on the slower road toward a new Earth, but apparently there has been a shift to the freeway because more humans are consciously and subconsciously now wanting it. Many humans are eager for change upon this planet, and I include myself among this group. We have known or felt that change was coming, but none were able to adequately state how or when changes would occur. This is dependent upon how many would hear the messages of change and begin to feel that message within themselves, and then begin to act upon those messages of change in their own unique and beautiful way. One website shares a message that humanity has chosen this accelerated timeline. Another website by Sandra Walter writes that an acceleration is occurring regardless of our choice. Evolution is evolution. We are receiving a third wave of photonic light in September, the third in a series of waves intended to prepare us for the global intense shift in 2017. The first wave was in December-January, the second in April-May, and the third arrives in September. All of these waves are focused on amplifying the shift in consciousness and ascension. This is a natural force of evolution in progress. How blessed we are to be incarnated during this fascinating passage. She continues by saying that timelines offer various choices for our collective experience and infinite possibilities for our individual experience. You are your own universe. However, when participating in a collective consciousness on a planet, the collective experience provides parameters for your creation within that collective. For those who are drawn to astrology, an informative message from Carl Boudreau is offered on his Facebook page explaining the eclipses of September and the movement of Jupiter into Libra on the 9th of September and the positive impacts this will have in shaking down more of the global cabal and moving humanity forward. Boudreau does offer the following. This surge of eclipse energy from the mutable T-square will accelerate the demise of the global oligarchy and hasten the end of the gross political and economic inequality that threatens global stability. The eclipse energies will trigger and accelerate karmic consequences for using dishonest and manipulative language. This will further cleanse our politics and economics of toxic rhetoric and hasten the end of the oligarchic institutions and practices that it supports. And that's all to the good. This is a change process we should all welcome. However, we have to admit that the change process has been difficult on many of us. Most of the disconcerting influences in August's chart do persist in September's eclipse charts. In fact, September's second eclipse chart looks like it would deliver an especially strong dose of the same vibes we weathered in August. and it would have done so if it were not for one crucial factor. Between September's two eclipses, Jupiter changes signs. Jupiter's entrance into Libra will significantly alter what, at first glance, seems like an extension of a rather difficult astrological pattern. And it will do so in a very positive and welcome way. Many of us will consider it welcome and long overdue. Another website, esphoria.org, shares that a spiritual gold rush will begin on the 1st of September in the year 2016, and the solar eclipse until the 16th of September, that is the lunar eclipse. It is within this mixture of the dark and light that the cosmos is most fertile and sprouts and projects the golden rays towards Earth and all planets and constellations. It is during this time that the veil is almost invisible, and you shall truly see truth as it is, and not as you have been made to believe it is. During these days, meditate, harvest this gold, channel it into your crown chakras and let it fill your body. Magnify it if you know how, and surround your planet with it. Allow it to permeate your very beings. Diane Canfield, via the in5d.com website, offers this to readers. September waves are going to start to bring in spontaneous healing which will not end. This has already taken place for me, and she is speaking for herself. All one needs to do is ask and keep asking to be healed, and the energy now exists for the healing to take place. Since we moved into a higher frequency in August, this energy is now available to be downloaded into our light bodies. We will want our freedom back to be able to be fully who we as the advanced beings of light came here to be. We will see that we can help so many others in our communities, and we will reach out to help whenever the opportunity arises. Communities of light workers are to become the norm as we move into creator mode. So we know that something is happening, although we may not know exactly when or how. The why is becoming more clear. Increasingly greater numbers of humans are tired of living as slaves to systems that are neither honorable to humanity nor to our planet. We are desiring to live in a better way, and more humans are ready to make conscious choices to co-create this change for the benefit of all. However, let's see what September brings us first, and see whether some of these alleged accelerated changes begin to manifest. My feeling is that we're in for a wild ride this month, and from this moment forward. Create a wonderful week until our next moment of now. So that is the sample of the unfolding higher consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is broadcast weekly from the CosmicVisionNews.com website. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary, which is available on the website and through the blog. CVN can be followed through its Facebook page, YouTube channel, and also Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that when you forgive, you don't change the past, you change the future. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.